Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
welcome. Hi, Noor. Hi, Marjorie.
Morning.
Oh, I don't
Morning.
think you're called Playium. There's someone, no name, just Playium Ltd. Hi. Oh, Charlotte, Claudine,
Morning.
welcome.
Hello.
Morning, everybody.
Aravinda. Is that how I say it? Aravindan. Aravindan. Tong, Madeline, Havana, Alvin. Very popular name in Canada.
I
Hey,
know. Thanks. Happy International Women's Day, everyone.
Oh,
Oh.
yes.
Thank you.
Good job, Alvin. Thank you for reminding us.
Alvin, is that today or tomorrow?
Today.
Today in
Depends on where you're
Because
sitting.
you're ahead of us by 12 hours.
Well,
So that's right. I was thinking it's March the 8th.
Yeah. Indeed.
And here it's still March 7.
Now you can celebrate earlier. It's always good.
We can.
There's
that's
never
very
too much
good. Good
celebrating.
heads up. We'll just wait for a few more people. Come in. Isaac is letting him in quickly, as fast as he can. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning. Everybody got their tea or their coffee ready to go?
Oh, and a yogurt. Noor is showing us. Was that a yogurt, Noor? Yeah. Nice. Tangi, I'm hesitant to say your name because I can't say it as beautifully as you can.
That is actually fine, Paul. Well done.
Tangi.
Yeah.
You say it, you have a bit of a French way of saying it. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm saying hello to the people with their cameras on, Kim and Pauline. Dawn. Lovely. Okay. Why don't we get started? And just welcome. This is our third session of 3 sessions, and it's just wonderful to have you here. Isaac, do you want to just bring the slides up? Also, oh no, what we were going to do first is Isaac he was going to put in the screen. Yeah, right here. Do you want to scroll? I hope everyone's been on this page. Because Isaac has put a lot of work into this, and this is going to be around for at least a year, and Joseph may want it around for even longer than a year. And it's also going to have all these sessions are being taped, and you're going to be able to go back and listen to them again. But here is the masterclass session 3 that Isaac has put together for us. It has the PowerPoint slides, and then it has a variety of papers that we thought you might find very interesting, and some tools and some resources. Isaac, do you want to go right back to the top? And I want to show that ebook. Can you just go there for a second? Right there. You want to press on it? The ebook, so if you scroll down a bit, you can access it. Now go to the online portal. You can download all of this as a PDF, or you can go to the online portal. But so here, let's just say, let's go to today. Let's go to Backbone, which I think is chapter 8. And look at here. You've got a kind of description of Backbone, but then go down further. And then you've got all these tools that will help you. So there's endless learning here that you can go back to. And then go all the way to the bottom. There's a diving deeper section. So after today, when Sylvia gets you completely excited about the Backbone, you know where to go to get lots more information. Okay, let's go to the slides. I wanted to show that to you because 3 sessions with Sylvia and Isaac and I is not enough to really understand the Backbone organization or collective impact generally, right? It's something that is an ongoing learning process for you. And so often it has to do with practice, as you know, even more than it does with the actual learning itself. And so that's where it becomes kind of a key understanding is, where can I find more resources? Where can I learn more about this? Again, just quickly, today, we're going to talk about the Backbone. We're going to talk about mutually reinforcing activities. And then we're going to understand the whole process of kind of evaluating and understanding impact in a very real way. And so it's just really helping you to understand what's happening. And what we'll have done is gone through the 5 conditions. And remember, I was going to test you again today, all together now. The first one, common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and the Backbone role. Learn those 5, memorize them, and it will always be easy to learn more as we do this work. Let's go to the next slide. And the next one. Again, the land acknowledgement, that's so important these days in Canada, as we've accepted and adopted a reconciliation process with our Aboriginal peoples. And we are hoping for a beautiful future together. Next slide. And we've just talked about all of this in terms of what we're going to learn today. And I'm hoping that this whole idea of many times people who take this training, and whether I can't really stereotype everyone in Singapore, but you sure like impact and understanding outcomes. That's really been drilled into your learning framework, and it's exciting to see, but more of that to come. Next slide. Remember these planning canvases. We've got the 2 sides. We've already gone through side 1. Let's go to the next one. And here we've got stuff for today. We've already done some of the engagement continuum work, and we're going to talk about getting to collective impact. We've got the 4 dimensions of measuring impact, all of them here. Again, if you fill in this 2 pages, you'll have a summary of everything we learned over the last 3 sessions. Next slide. Okay. How about if we just open the chat box and just everybody put one idea in? What insights or even what new questions are emerging for you now? Just put that right into the chat box. What's arising for you? We like to say that. What's arising? What's coming up in your mind, or what are you feeling? Or we even love confusion at Tamarack, because when you're confused, that means you're on a journey, you're searching. Okay, Tanguy, target systems, not symptoms. Love it. Okay. Samuel, is collective impact workable where I work? Okay, interesting. And, is it the right issue? We've only got a few so far. Let's keep going. Everybody's got to put one in. What's arising for you? What are your insights? Let's go to the chat box and put an idea in, or a question that's coming up for you. What does efficiency mean? Who is my collective? Okay. How do I apply this on an existing project where there already are some structures in place? Are we patient enough to follow this approach? Thinking of the action plan. Yasmin, who is currently working on the same agenda and how can we come together? Kim Lang, trust and turf in collaboration, commitment. Challenging to build trust and get sufficient data. There's a lot, Charlotte, there's a lot of work towards building collective impact. We need to be ready for the investment of time, resources. We need to get the right people with shared visions. Claudine, collective impact seems to come more naturally for some than others. How do we win them over? Great questions. Sean, collaboration. Well, that's wonderful. Just keep putting your insights and ideas and questions in there. We're going to follow those. Next slide, Isaac. Okay, I'm passing you over to Sylvia. And I asked her before she starts, before we were on the call together a little earlier, and I said, Sylvia, do you like teaching about the backbone? She said, I love it. And so here you are with one of her favorite things to teach, the backbone structure of collective impact. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Thanks so much, Paul. And thanks, everybody. I've been enjoying everything in the chats and been working with Isaac to paste those into our mural. So we'll have them as an anchor. And yes, I do love speaking about the collaborative governance and the collective impact backbone, in part because when I started doing this collaborative work in my own community, the articulation of the importance and need for a backbone had not been named because collective impact had not yet debuted. And I remember the first time I learned about collective impact going, of course, this is one of those missing golden ingredients. And so I'm keen to dive into it a little bit with you. Okay, on to the next. So there's this beautiful quote in the original paper written by John Kania and Mark Kramer, that the expectation that collaboration can occur without any kind of supporting infrastructure is one of the primary reasons why it fails. And that's why I'm excited by this. It's the intentionality with which we think about not just the what we want to do, but how do we organize ourselves free from the artificially imposed limitations of a preconceived organization or a preconceived model. On to the next. So for me, when I think about collaborative governance and how it fits together with this notion of the backbone, the collaborative governance piece is the agreements that partners make between and amongst each other around how they are going to work together and how they're going to navigate certain key decisions and have it mapped out so that there's clarity. We can still work together well. We understand our accountabilities to our respective organizations and to each other, but we're primarily focused on what we're trying to do together. Okay, on to the next. So when you go to build your framework for effective governance, so we're going to talk about this part of it first. How do you collectively govern? How do you govern together? The trick, the overarching mantra that I want you to hold on to is less is more. So the objective is in designing your agreements and your structures for how you work together, you want to keep them clear and solid enough that people trust each other enough that they can work well together and have some guideposts if they fall upon a situation that they hadn't anticipated and need to problem solve. But generally speaking, you want to just create enough space and put the lion's share of your energy and attention into the work you're trying to do together. So when you're thinking about what kind of governance agreements do we need to help us to work well together, it's really about being clear about what the goals are. What are you trying to get done together? What are the principles that are important about how you do that work? How do decisions get made? And how do we share ownership and responsibility? You want to be able to think through, not to the nth degree, but in general, what are the things we need to create the kinds of positive dynamic working relationships with one another to keep our work moving forward? And if we run into challenges, do we have some guidelines around how we would address those? And just being really clear about that framework and having all those agreements kind of consolidated in one place. On to the next. So generally speaking, you want to stay as high level as you can. You want your big picture clear for anyone coming in or any board reviewing an application, or a proposal that they join this collaborative, that you have an aspiration that really speaks to community need. You've got clear principles that guide how you're committed to acting, that they can live with and align with the organizational values, and that you have a broad common agenda and plan for how and what you're going to do together with other partners. You want to articulate and be clear about who is and is not part of the collaborative and what does membership mean. How do decisions get made? If there is funding, how does that funding get managed? What are the understandings about communication and reporting to the member organizations, to the community as a whole, and some basic policies and procedures. And then typically, it's very common that there are memorandums of understanding between lead agencies. Sometimes there's a term of reference, and there's also some thought given to how conflict should be resolved if it shows up. Typically, it's useful to think about these things as living documents, right? So what you want to make sure is that you don't get bogged down in imagining every worst case scenario and creating a rule for every worst case scenario, which may or may not ever come to be. You want enough so that people feel that there's a solid set of agreements and we can trust each other, and then know that this will be something that we review on an annual basis or every 6 months, just to make sure that we've got what we need as the work moves forward. If you go to the next. All right, so when we run into problems with shared or collaborative governance, it's partly because nobody has defined anything with respect to governance, and we haven't made time for those kinds of conversations. So everybody's walking around with a different set of assumptions in their heads about how this works, that we are not clear around what levels of accountability the different players at the table have for the decisions that are made. The other thing I've seen that shows up around accountability often is that 3 organizations designate senior executive members to be part of this collaborative effort, and the other 2 agencies send summer interns. So these 3 have a lot of power and authority to make decisions and commitments on behalf of their respective organization, and these 2 don't. So it becomes almost impossible to get all folks moving forward in the same way. So that's an important consideration. Decision making. What do we have the authority as a group of representatives from different organizations? What is it we have the authority to make decisions around? When and how do we have to bring these back to our broader organizations and or the community? And another one that comes up here, if we're not clear about decision making, is if we have a collaborative table that welcomes in at any time anyone who wants to be part of the process, to sit in, to learn, to participate in the conversations. That's beautiful. But if we're not clear about a certain attendance level, for example, that you have to have before you can vote on decisions, it can be problematic if someone new then keeps wanting to bring the conversation all the way back to the issue that we resolved and are moving forward on as of 4 meetings ago. So you want to have clarity, and it's a difficult balance, right? How do you make everyone feel welcome at the table whenever they choose to join in, but at the same time, make sure that there's a momentum and a credibility around the decisions that are being made. And so membership. Really want people to know and understand not only the contributions that you are going to make to this collaborative effort, but what you can count on your collaborative partners to also put on the table. Sometimes members aren't clear why they're there. They're not clear what the problem is and what it is that's expected of them. And so they're not fully engaged. And then the piece about member organizations is I may be a really animated member of this collaborative on behalf of organization ABC, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I am bringing this information back and ensuring that the entire organization shares my enthusiasm and commitment. On to the next. So, really important for clarity, focusing on how does the collaborative table come together? How often do you meet? Who sets agendas? Do you take turns chairing the meeting? That kind of thing. How do we make decisions, right? There's a whole range. In the collaborative effort that I was part of, we stated very clearly that our intention whenever possible was to reach consensus. And that if consensus could not be reached, that we would opt for a majority. Being clear also about what decisions you're allowed to make and who needs to be consulted around those is also really important. On to the next. So here's a picture that we often use. It looks a little overwhelming, but I'll walk you through it to understand and appreciate how you do a collaborative governance structure, infrastructure, okay? So if you think that across the top there, you see we've got our 5 conditions of collective impact, and this is the structure that supports getting it done. So on the far left, let's start with the purple ring. The purple ring for me is really reminding us that we are accountable to a broader audience of the community stewards. These are, citizen leaders, residents. These are often key stakeholder groups within the community. And ultimately, we're always thinking about doing this work in service of those needs. The backbone in the context of collective impact, for me, is that red box on the far left. It consists of 2 things: the collective impact leadership table. So you've got members from different organizations across, all sitting around the same table, one of whom, or sometimes it's more than one, but at least one of whom is agreed to be the fiscal sponsor or fiscal host, meaning they're the ones that are doing the bookkeeping and keeping track of the dollars that have been allocated to support this initiative on behalf of the collective. It's not their money, it's the collective impact initiative's money. And in addition to that leadership table, there's a core team, dedicated staff team, typically no more than 2 people. Like, it's not a huge organization, but these are people that are senior level people, skilled at facilitation, skilled in the use of data and analysis. And they play a key role in ensuring that the various leadership table members and action teams are supported to get their work done between meetings. Okay. And then if you think about the pink sort of bubble on the outside, that's the entire ecosystem that you're working in. So in the case of, this could be all of Singapore, okay, the pink in the outside. And you'll see these little white blobs, and those are different kinds of organizations that exist already in the community. Is every organization part of your collaborative effort? No, not necessarily. They're just nonprofits or businesses that, you have to be aware of and are there. Then what happens is, as you get your common agenda confirmed, you'll see that there'll be priority areas of activity or action. And typically what happens is that someone from the leadership table, 1 or 2 folks, they go and they form the chairship of an action team. So if one of our priority areas around a vibrant community is making sure that all young children thrive. We might have an early childhood development action team. So that also, like the leadership table, has a membership that is multi-sectoral and diverse. And their work is to absolutely champion and figure out the work plan to advance their piece on early childhood development on behalf of the whole. Okay. Similarly, there are other action teams that have been formed, and they each have their own dedicated focus and area of attention. When I'm a chair of one of these action teams, I'm really got my nose down thinking about that specific issue and being very focused on that. When I assume my seat at the collective impact leadership table, what I'm more interested in is how do these pieces all fit together? And I'm taking more of a bird's eye view. One of the most effective things that I've done when I've been doing this kind of work is not solely relying on the backbone staff and or the chairs of the action teams to help kind of make sure that the work of the various action teams is aligned and synergized. But once or twice a year, we would host an event, like an internal event only for all volunteers and folks involved in this work, maybe a half-baked idea fair. So we're being very clear, this is a chance for each one of the action teams to shine a spotlight on what they're working on, what they're challenged by, and get feedback and input from other action team members. Not only does this do a really good job of ensuring that everyone involved in the initiative has a good handle on all of the activity that the collective is moving forward, not just their little piece, but it also creates another level of relationship building that can be really, really, really important. You know, because there may be 3 other people from my organization, I had no clue, were involved in one of the other action teams. So knowing that and creating opportunities to foster those relationships, not just at the leadership table, but throughout the initiative as a whole, are really, really important. Okay, on to the next. So if you think about the backbone, right, there is that leadership table in the ecosystem as I worked it through. So let's go on, and this will kind of break it down in a bit more detail. So we've talked about this, and the role of this group, the backbone, is to monitor the overall health of the collaborative and make sure that there are action teams or constellations that help drive forward the goal and focus of the initiative as a whole. On to the next. So there are 6 core functions that the leadership backbone or infrastructure is responsible for. They guide the overall vision and strategy for the collaborative effort. They make sure that there are shared measures that we have agreed upon and that there are practices in place for those to be tracked. They are the ones that lead out on the communication on behalf of the whole. They're the ones that are looking at that broader systems or policy change agenda on behalf of the whole. They mobilize funding for the collective effort, and they are the ones that are real champions of equity, diversity, inclusion, and making sure that power is well balanced across all levels of the initiative. And as someone holding this role, the tension that you're holding is always between accountability and also allowing people to step up and claim responsibility for, like, you're kind of leading from behind, right? You want to hold people accountable as well as continue to engage and build shared ownership. On to the next. So if you think about, here's some good information, just roughly, about the composition. It's most useful to have a diversity of perspectives. Initially, they meet quite frequently, but then as things get moving, they may not need to meet as often. And the backbone staff are always sort of there as supports. On to the next. So it isn't just because you're part of a perspective that we need at the table doesn't necessarily mean you're the best character to be representing that sector. And some of the things that we've learned to be looking for as you think about rounding out your leadership table, you want folks that are highly regarded by their peers, because this isn't positional authority, it's more relational authority. You want people who are well known and trusted and that people enjoy working with, right? They're very knowledgeable and passionate. They are capable of thinking big picture, but also not shy to roll up their sleeves and get work done. And that they tend to have a real hunger and capacity to innovate and do things differently. The very first best chair I ever had in the collaborative that I helped start in my community was a retired entrepreneur. And it was brilliant because he had all kinds of time because he was newly retired, but as a small business entrepreneur in our community, he knew everybody. And he was just totally energized and not at all intimidated that there was this blank canvas about what we were going to do sitting in front of him. He wasn't worried that there wasn't a roadmap. He was excited that there wasn't a roadmap. And it's really important to get the right kind of people around the table. On to the next. So let's talk about those action teams, right? You build them around ideas and opportunities. You don't build them around specific sectors or organizations. They are champions of a particular priority of the collective impact work. And they work in ways that are absolutely consistent with the mission and vision and values of the collaborative as a whole. You want them to have a diverse membership. You also want the chairs to play a key role along with the staff of making sure that there's good alignment across the various teams. And they all get facilitation support from staff as needed. On to the next. So how do you know that you've got a good enough structure? You know because the group is making good progress, that effort and conflict amongst the players is reasonable. People feel like there's value and purpose for them being at this table. And they think that it's important for them to be there. Everyone is learning more about the issue and able to talk and share about that. And that the process seems to attract new people and be self-fueling as the work gains momentum. On to the next. All right, so here in a nutshell is the summary, right? Around the different focus and contribution of the different elements of the structure and what they are accountable for. Okay, on to the next. So, a couple of final thoughts to leave you with around structure. The working relationship between the different partners is essential. And understanding and working within the limits of the accountability and the structure is really, really important. For you, if you're the convener, the tension or challenge will be between finding a good balance between process, so people are getting to know each other, building trust, understanding the issue from each other's perspectives, and at the same time producing things, putting things down on paper, even if it's not perfect, so we can get it out and test it with other people. And also using opportunities always to learn together and build connections with one another. I think lastly, I would say, if there is one common stumble that I see, is that people, particularly if they've read more about the early works of collective impact, where they refer to it as a collective impact backbone organization, that's where you start running into problems. And I think I mentioned this in our first session, but I really want to underscore it here. The tension or challenge is always that this should not be about creating an organization. A collective impact initiative is a new way for existing organizations and groups to work together. So you do not want to have, and when we start thinking about our collective impact initiative as an organization, you'll know for a couple of reasons. One, the leadership table starts delegating, of 14, starts delegating to the staff of 1 or 2. We need you to do this, we need you to do this, we need you to do this between meetings. No. It has to be the other way around. The staff is there to support, but each member of the leadership table is committing to do work between the meetings and bring it back. So that's one way in which it's not an organization. And the other way in which it's not an organization is you want this entity, this collective impact initiative, to be the place where we get to be innovative, to be the place where we get to prototype new things. So we do not want to be bogged down with with all kinds of incorporation or making ourselves a charity or on and on and on. We've got all of those things across our partnership. We want to focus this work on being agile, nimble, freer of the rules and constraints that may limit an individual organization from trying something new. Knowing darn well that the existing organizations which each of us are part of are going to continue to give good quality service and supports to people in need. And our job is to focus on finding the new, the better, the more impactful ways of continuing to support the needs of those folks. Okay, last slide. I think there's one more. So just recently, I think December, I co-authored a paper with Liz Weaver and Mark Cabage, which really unpacks Tamarack's experience as what we're calling a field building catalyst. And I'm going to put it out here for you to think about, because one of the things we've learned is often you have these individual collective impact initiatives all happening at a local level, right? But what we've discovered is that they can be a lot more effective and impactful if there is a catalyst organization braiding them together. So this training would be a perfect example where NCSS is sort of playing a catalyst role in bringing representatives from different organizations and perhaps in the future from different collective impact initiatives to learn together and to learn from one another about how they are each contributing to addressing a common issue. So that's part one of what they do. Part two of what they do around linking the bottom is that they look across all these collective impact initiatives that are starting to percolate up, and they're starting to find common patterns, common themes. They're starting to see that there are key issues that many of them are seeing as barriers that they need to have addressed. And they play a really critical role then in bringing that wisdom and insight collectively up to the other big system players that can have an opportunity to affect change at a greater level. And at the same time, at the beginning, they're also kind of networking with those broader system players to get an understanding of what the issues and worries are. So they're really linking these four parts together. And what we've discovered is that while an individual collective impact initiative may be modestly successful in advancing systems change, when they are linked together and able to learn from one another, their capacity to both have impact and affect systems change is accelerated, and the work is made more simple and more effective. So as you learn together in this network, this could be a beautiful kind of beginning for you around that. All right, so I think that brings us to the end. Are there any specific comments, questions, thoughts, or ideas around this? First and foremost, comments, questions? All right. If not, I have an exercise for you to play with. So let me introduce that and we'll come back and have a more fulsome discussion afterward. Okay, one of the early things that's critically important is to get clear amongst partners what gives, what can they bring to the collaborative effort? What do they hope to gain from being part of the collaborative effort? And what's important for them to tell partners about the limitations that they're working within? If you go to the next slide, what we know, and this is a practice that actually comes from It comes from software developing, like we're high creativity, high pressure. If we know that creating a shared understanding is that cornerstone of what we need to build trust. If we share individual stories about why a collaborative partner is at the table, what experience they bring, what they hope to benefit from either personally or organizationally, that's key to creating the kind of shared understanding we need. And it really will be the thing that helps us navigate tensions and challenges as the work unfolds. Okay, on to the next. So we know that many of us fall into, without question, this thought that my personal needs may be in competition or conflict with the needs of the greater good. That often happens. But the reality is we're just assuming that, and we haven't actually tested it. And part of the reason that we don't test it is we don't make space in our conversations when we're forming to understand cleanly and clearly what we want to have happen together, and how will it benefit you? How will it benefit me? How will it benefit my organization or your organization? And also to be really clear about, look, we have this commitment and we're really interested in this, but if it starts to move over into this, I'm going to have real trouble justifying why my organization can stay involved. Like being able to say, this is what I can give, but this is what I have to get. And these are the constraints is really, really a powerful foundation upon which you can begin to build trust. All right, if you go to the next. So what can you or your organization contribute to a collective impact initiative? How would you or your organization need to benefit so that you would have wide support to stay involved? And what are the things that you would like partners to know are limits? Like we have, you know, at most two full-time equivalents that we could, you know, free up to work on this work. That's it. And only until the next budget cycle, which for us is in April. Like knowing that kind of stuff is really helpful. And if I say things like, okay, folks, I'm representing this organization and I'm going to give lots of extra time. But one of the gets is I'm also working on my master's thesis, and I want to be able to use some of what I learn here to inform my master's research. Like if I'm upfront about that, what's beautiful is then the other partners can say, oh, well, Sylvia, you better go sit in on this meeting, or what, you know, how might this help inform your research? And so it doesn't feel like we have hidden agendas. All our agendas are being put out on the table. And so we don't feel like we have to choose between our good and the greater good. Does that feel clear? So what I'd like to ask you to do now is I'm going to put you into small groups. Welcome back, everybody. How easy was it for you to be able to articulate either your individual or your organization's gives?
I think we have to confess for our group, we brought up stories of dealing with toxic organizations that, you know, wanted to gain as much for themselves, they want to give much, and we're very quiet about the constraints as well. And it's just, but we found the tool very, very helpful because people talk about hidden agendas. This is a very transparent way of bringing stuff to the table as well. And then the other aspect we thought is that sometimes we talk about, you know, dealing with complex issues. It's actually also good to do a kind of historical study as to how things came about, because that also will kind of maybe give a sense as where you need to do a bit of healing in the community, bridge building and stuff like that to get the trust then to build as well. So we're just wondering, in terms of the historical background, who would do that in, you know, in getting that sense of, you know, seeing where, you know, who to involve and things like that. I mean, sensitive to the fact that historically there have been, you know, wrongs that could not quite heal. Until that's done, you're not really going to get a productive collab. Yeah.
Well, and then whoever you choose to be the teller of the history, right? They automatically have a power. But a slight twist on that might make it easier is, what are the stories that we tell ourselves about our community? right? Because there could be multiple stories, right? But then everyone can contribute the stories, and you can say, wow, and when you look across these stories, like there's a real theme of us as entrepreneurs, or there's this real theme of us as hard done by, or, you know, I don't know what it is, but then you can say, well, this is how those outside our community see us. How do we want to be seen? And what would it take for us to shift that? That would be a beautiful opening that would actually create space for everybody, right? To feel like they would benefit from and could make a contribution toward. Yeah, but I think that insight about we all come to this work with a legacy of, you know, just as we all have to pay for the sins of all the poor engagement opportunities that we've had to endure beforehand, I think we've all been on teams where there have been people who have not been upfront about what their agenda is, and that absolutely undermines trust. It was fascinating. I remember doing this exercise actually with board members, and it was an awkward situation where all these different service provider organizations had been told by the funder who was going to merge with whom and who was going to be the lead to figure all of this stuff out. And so what they were realizing partway down the process is that the key staff people from the different organizations weren't being as transparent when they went back to their boards talking about what the implications of this was or whatever. And so there was resistance popping up all over, even though the organizational rep was, you know, towing the line and saying that they were doing everything that they were doing. And so they organized a board-to-board session, and they talked about what the future was going to bring and what each organization could contribute, what they would need to get, and what constraints were. And it was fascinating because it really kind of opened it all up and then diffused the power of a few people trying to block a process. Yeah. So good for you. Anybody else? Thoughts, ideas, questions?
Sylvia.
Yes.
Charlotte, yeah. I wanted to add to what Tommy was saying as well. I think it is true that while we work towards a collective goal, we all must acknowledge that we have a personal agenda, and it's nothing wrong with that, because that's why we're here. With why we're in the collective, because of our personal passion for what we do. And I think it's complementary. Of course, it shouldn't be that I must push my program works. No, it's not about that. It's acknowledging that we have a personal interest into shaping our own work, but towards a collective good, I think. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's a brilliant point to emphasize. And I think one of the values of this as an exercise is it's easy to do, but it creates the space to invite that in and to validate that there's nothing wrong with each one of us having a purpose and a need that deserves to be met while meeting the greater good.
Yeah. So this was brought up by our teammate, and I think this is something we discussed also in the group. Yeah.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Anybody else? Comments, questions, or thoughts about this? Do you have any thoughts or ideas if there are some people who are more by nature reticent to come forward and speak? Are there different ways we could do this that might make it easier for them to contribute?
We brought
Can
up
you write
that.
the thoughts? Sorry, I'm just
No,
thinking because.
sorry, Tanvi.
Sorry, just very quickly, because you have this the two tribes, the extroverts, the introverts. I think sometimes when we have sharing sessions, we shouldn't be too extrovert friendly in the sense that we have to value the people who are quiet, but maybe they want to, like, you know, send them in writing, and sometimes they are absolutely fantastic feedback because they really take into effect as well too. So I'm just saying that the dynamics of getting feedback or interaction have to meet both tribes, lah, if I can call it that. Yeah.
So what thoughts might you have around how we could do that well?
The ways of either, I mean, I've seen exercises before, like, you know, people write down on Post-its and then they kind of like put up their thoughts. It's a case where they can actually, after the session, they can actually write in what they thought about it, and you know, you allow feedback even post-session as well, because I think some people, they need to digest before they actually want to give feedback around the spot as well. So just creating these mechanisms to just allow feedback depending on what the preference is as well. So just some ideas. Yeah.
I like that a lot because I think you're right. And I think some people need more time to be reflective, and or you might need to come back and see it with a week's perspective and now see new things.
I think there are also stakeholders which cannot represent their community. Like they can't speak openly about, how do I say this? That there are some people in government or in organizations that cannot be seen to represent their community as a spokesperson. So
Right.
we've encountered this before where they cannot be quoted or be videoed or be pictured.
So I would tweak and say, but what we're asking for here is not quite the same thing, because I'm presuming if they are sitting at the table, they have a stake in and or a role to play in the collaborative work.
Okay, so this is the leadership team.
Yes, so I would want to say to them, you know, we're not going to hold you, you know, what can you say for sure that, you know, the government, as you know, in your role, that the government is willing to commit to this? What are some things that you know are important for us to be mindful of that you might need that would help benefit you through this process? And
how do you balance between if you were in a situation that you were a stakeholder in, whether it's a government or a big organization, that you balance between your personal opinions after going through the system versus saying things that are politically correct?
I think it comes with time, right? I think it comes with time. I think, but I do think if people know, like to Tanguy's point, like that people need some time to think, you might need to go back to your superiors who delegated you to be the representative of the government department of X on this table, you know, saying, here are the things that, you know, all partners are being asked to contribute. What's reasonable for us to put on this table, right? What can I commit to as our representative at this table? What do I say is important? What is it important that folks know that we need? And what are some of the really important constraints I need to put on the table? Because it is about building trust, right? Yeah. And it's different because I'm not speaking out against government or speaking out against my boss. What I am doing is I'm speaking forward in terms of what I will contribute. So it's not quite the same thing. And the other thing that I've seen people do once this is done is step back. And when they take a look at all the contributions or the gives, all the gets, and all the constraints, then they can say, wow, is there anything we're really missing? Right? Or anything in terms of people's expectations that we see we might need to manage or be clear isn't in our scope, that kind of thing. So it's a nice check, right? All right. Well, I am mindful of time, and you've earned yourself your first break of the morning.